guys, welcome back to Room 237, and now we come to the fourth and final film in Severan's Umberto Lenzi, Carol Baker, Giallo box set with 1972's Knife of Ice. Now, I mentioned in my last review, which was for A Quiet Place to Kill, that the first three films are often listed as a trilogy when this box set comes up, and Knife of Ice is hardly ever mentioned. I'm starting to see why, because this is a very, very different film. This is the only one to come out post-Argento in 1972, even though Quiet Place to Kill was 1970. But, so this one definitely follows that formula a little bit more. Although, it is rare for the time that, he goes for more atmosphere and suspense, and the sex, nudity, blood, and violence kind of takes a back seat. Normally that would turn a lot of Giallo fans off, but, I think he succeeded with what he tried to do with the suspense and the atmosphere. I think Carol Baker, once again, did a good job with her role. This one's pretty unique because she's mute, which I'll get into. Before I get into the film, the box set itself, I will say this one's probably at the bottom of how I would rank these films. I would still put Orgasmo at the top, but I still think it's a very solid film. It's still, it's got some great cinematography. I love the score. There's a pretty good twist that I didn't see coming. But I also see a few other twists it could have taken that could have been just as interesting. So it's still a good film that I can recommend. Now, it's also known as Dagger of Ice and the Ice Pick, which the Ice Pick makes it sound like a slasher film. So, directed by Umberto Lenzi, and the story was by him and Antonio Troiso, if I pronounce that correctly. The cinematography was by Jose F. Aguayo Jr., if I pronounced that correctly. And the music was by Marcello Giambini, if I pronounced that correctly. Which, I know I've seen that name before, so just to take a look at what he's done. Flowers with the Petals of Steel, which I do have coming in. Bloodsucker Leads the Dance, which I've wanted to see. Terror Express, Anthropophagus. So, yeah, done some horror and Giallo films. Now the cast, other than Carol Baker, we have George Rigaud, who I was trying to place where I've seen him recently. He was in Eyeball, directed by Lenzi. He was also in Case of the Bloody Iris. And we have Evelyn Stewart, who was in Giallo films like Sweet Body of Deborah, Weekend Murders, Case of the Scorpion's Tail, Blitz Date Butterfly, Murder Mansion, Footprints on the Moon, which I may pick up, and The Psychic. And she's been in other horror films like The Whip in the Body. So, you have a few recognizable people behind and in front of the camera. And apparently this film is somewhat of a retelling, or has been compared to, or a variation of Robert Siodmak's The Spiral Staircase, if I pronounce his last name correctly. Every name in this review I'm probably going to butcher. But also it's been compared to Lucio Fulci because of the script and some of the cinematography, particularly his film actually that's this film. It doesn't say which film, and which I can see because this movie does have a lot to do with eyes, which we all know how much Fulci loves eyes, even if he's not gouging them out. And so yeah, while the first three films is definitely like a murder for hire kind of story with plenty of sex and nudity in them, that is definitely part of the pre-Argento formula. This one's definitely the post-Argento formula. And again, 1972 is my favorite year for Giallo. that I think just has the most of my favorites that came out. But it's definitely more of like an old dark house, kind of almost gothic type story, which there are some scenes like there's a scene in fog, and then a scene where she's just walking through her villa by candlelight, which is something to say about the candlelight when I get to it. That does have a lot of atmosphere and does help give it that gothic feel. Now, Carol Baker plays Martha, who, when she was a child, she was in a train wreck, literally, with her parents, which she got thrown off the train. That's how she survived. But her parents were killed, and the trauma from that had rendered her mute, and also terrified of trains and train stations. But it opens up with bullfighting, which I'm sure is real because, one, it's an Italian film. They've never shied away from stuff like that. And two, it takes place in Spain, where they have bullfighting all the time. And it does show a lot of the stabbings and the removal of the swords after the bull has been killed. And I should go back and see when those flashbacks come back, because it does make sense with the twist, which I'll get into that after spoilers. But then it has this quote by Edgar Allan Poe, which is where the title comes from, which is knife of ice. Well, here they kind of butchered it, but knife of ice which penetrates the senses down to the depth of conscience. I think they kind of, see if I can get the actual quote here. No, I guess not. But anyway, so that kind of makes sense, even though we don't really see much of a knife even during the killings. And so Carol Baker is a mute, but in the very beginning, she is at the train station to pick up her cousin Jenny, who's a famous singer, played by Evelyn Stewart. And when they get back to her Uncle Ralph, played by George Weah, get back to his villa, there's a series of murders that start. And the inspectors are led to believe that some sort of Satanist cult might be responsible. And I know this one picture, and probably one of the most memorable images from the film. I know this is on one of the DVDs that you can get of this film, but a guy with these crazy irises, he pops up from time to time. And so I thought this is why it was a good twist, because this is one of those movies where just as far as the mystery for who the killer is, I kept thinking, okay, we know it's the guy with the eyes, or we're led to believe, and that there's some Satanist cult involved, but so where's the mystery? Well, there's also a ton of red herrings. I mean, the movie, think about good Giallo, like the well-written ones from this period, it always focuses on one or two characters that makes them overly suspicious to the point where it can't be them. And in this case, it would be Carol's doctor, who is played by Dr. Laurent, who is played by Franco Fantasia, which he did look familiar. He kept reminding me of the guy that played Daggett in The Dark Knight Rises. But he goes all the way back to the 50s. But let's just see if he was in anything. Cross Current, I do believe, is a Giallo. Seven Bloodstained Orchids, that's probably where I've seen him. Zombie 2, okay. Eaten Alive. Okay, so I've actually reviewed a few films that he's been in, which I don't know He's able to communicate with Martha, Carol Baker, like she does like charades when she's communicating. He's able to get what she's saying, but over the phone she just taps. She taps the receiver, but I don't know if she's doing Morse code and he's able to pick that up, or if just for convenience he knows what she's saying when she taps, even if they're on the phone. But she picks her cousin up, and their chauffeur, Marcus, who is played by Eduardo Fajardo, which I know I've seen him in other films. I know that name. Oh, he goes all the way back to the 40s with his career. Let's see. Of course, a lot of these are going to be in Italian and not say they're Knife of Ice, Lisa the Devil, Killer Must Kill Again, which I would like to get, but that's super pricey. Nightmare City. Okay, I actually thought he was in more Giallo than that. He probably is, but these just aren't. The Killer with 1,000 Eyes, which I have not seen yet. But anyway, he reminds me of like Karloff, like later in life Karloff, especially when he wears his sunglasses. They have to pull the car over to let it cool off, and that's when we see the guy with the eyes who like comes up to the car and like looks in at them. He pops up a few times, but yeah. So I think her Uncle Ralph. I don't know if he's a professor or just an intellect, but he has like a lot of reference books on Satanism, which they pop up. He also has a very bad heart. He's easily prone to heart attacks. But the first victim is Evelyn Stewart. She is found stabbed in the garage, as is this young girl, Christina. I don't remember her relationship to Martha. I think they're just friends. She gets a new kitten. The kitten's found dead. And there is this great sequence where some of Jenny's luggage got lost at the train station. So after her funeral, Martha goes to retrieve it. But she gets freaked out by this picture she sees, and it shows the bullfighting sequence again. But when she gets outside, it's just this thick fog that, the score, the background music sounds a lot like the Silent Hill theme, like the soft theme, while the foreground music, or like the louder, more pronounced music, sounds like the melody to Jack's Lament from Nightmare Before Christmas. It's a great piece of music. I also love the vocal piece in the opening credits. So just with that music and just with how it's shot, with her wandering through this fog, and I mean, really does feel like there's no one else around. It did have this very gothic but also Silent Hill vibe to it, which I really enjoyed. And the chauffeur just looks super suspicious as hell. He always looks super sinister. But the doctor always pops up like whenever someone's killed, or he's always in an immediate hurry to leave the villa, but then he always has to go back for something. He always forgets something, and then when he comes back, that's when they find this other body, which conveniently is right when he arrives. So the guy with the eyes pops up a few times, and the movie really focuses on those two for red herrings. Also, when the inspectors are looking at Jenny's body, they say there was another girl that was killed like the same morning, which is someone we don't know, and it was off screen, but not on the property, way off, like on the side of the road. And so that's when he comes to the conclusion that it's a maniac, possibly a sex maniac, which every killer in Giallo films always gets called like a sex maniac. So, and is pretty much, you know, I keep wanting to say Jenny, but, how, traumatized Martha is. She's mute, which does set up some good suspense because a killer's going to be, stalking her at some point. And there is a scene where she's trying to get this one motorcycle cop's attention when they have full patrol on her house. She's trying to get his attention, like waving her arms, and the guy just like waves to her. And then he goes to leave, but she smashes a mirror to make a noise. So it sets up some good suspense because she can't scream. Not really sure how much to say before I get into spoilers. Also, well, what I was gonna say about the other scene that I really like with like just its atmosphere and its cinematography is, and another thing that makes the chauffeur look suspicious is because then the housemaid is killed. I think she's running an errand because people have to keep going to the pharmacy to get Ralph's heart drops, and she's riding her bike back and like through the forest, and she gets killed. So it's just Ralph and Martha at the villa alone at night, and she has this candle, but Lindsay does this trick to make it look like a circle of light around her. You can tell it's a flashlight, like someone behind the scenes is just following her with a flashlight. It's a cool little trick. I mean, it has charm to it because it doesn't always keep up with her, or it kind of wanders off at times. I thought it was a decent trick. And the house is right by a cemetery. And then, like, right when she feels like she's being followed, that's when Marcus, the chauffeur, pops up, and he looks all creepy like he always does. But it almost feels like a Gastaldi Giallo because, at the very end, when you know the twist and you think back to everything, it's one of the ones that makes a lot of sense. There's not a whole lot of convenience or things left out. It's one that all the pieces are left in place pretty well. See, I don't really know much else to say about it. I mean, and eventually they do find the guy with the eyes. I mean, we see him full face and everything. And people have said he was inspired by Manson because he does look, he's got long hair. He looks like a hippie. Talks about being a Satanist. He's also a morphine addict. But it's not as much to talk about as, say, the other three films, but it's still a pretty solid film. I definitely didn't see the twist coming. I actually thought, like, for a split second, it was going to be 2 or 3 different things that would have been equally cool, I think. But, I think that's a testament to how decent the writing is, because if it gets you thinking even other good things, then it's got to be somewhat good. But yeah, I guess I'll just get into spoilers for this, so. So at one point, I can't remember, I think it was when the housemaid gets killed, the doctor shows up again and he has blood on his pants. And they're like, what's that spot of blood? He was like, oh, there was a laborer that cut his hand and he got some on me. One of the times he just keeps popping up when someone gets killed. Also, there's the girl, Christina, who in the beginning of the film, she gives Martha this necklace of Snoopy and tells her to always wear it. I thought the girl was a little annoying in this. She wasn't Bob from the Fulci films, but yeah, I guess not terribly annoying, but she was getting there. Before she gets killed, she's playing kind of a Marco Polo game in the garden with Martha, where one of them's blindfolded. They like follow the sound of their voice or claps, and then and of course Martha can't find her when it's her turn. Takes the blindfold off. She's completely missing. So she goes and gets everyone. They all go looking for her. The doctor's already left, and they find her strangled out by the garden somewhere. But when they find her, the doctor's standing over her, checking her pulse. I do like the procedure the inspector has them do, where it was like, okay, what were you doing when... Because when Martha takes her blindfold off, she's like clapping to see if the girl will come out. Saying, okay, what were you doing when you heard the clap up until she came to get you? So they asked the chauffeur, this other new maid that they have, and the doctor. So they all go back, retrace their steps, and time it to see if they all come together at the same time, I'm guessing, to see who has something wrong with their story. I thought that was interesting. But when they do that, that's when Ralph has a heart attack, because he's also looking at the young girl's things, like her books, and he finds this like notebook, and he looks at it, and he looks really scared and shocked, and he puts it away. I'm like, oh, okay, that's gonna come back. But also I thought, what if it is Ralph? Because it does show he's always reading these books on the occult and Satanism. There's even a flashback to when Jenny and Martha were at a bookstore, and Jenny picks out a book on Satanism, saying, I'm gonna buy this for Ralph. And while that's going on, eventually the hippie guy, the vagrant, does get picked up. First, he's breaking into the pharmacy to steal some morphine, and then he's seen in the cemetery. They do get a hold of him, and they do find out, because they dig up the girl from the beginning, the one that was found on the rocks. They do an autopsy, and they say her cause of death was a heroin overdose. And he got scared, dumped her body, and left. And this is after the young girl Christina gets killed, because they're like, well, if our sex maniac was put away, then, we gotta do some extra work here. But he's still in jail, I guess it's for all that breaking and entering and leaving a body. But it was at this time I was thinking, okay, what if it is Ralph? Because there was a point after that where, after his heart attack, they tell Martha in the hospital that, he died. And then that's when, she's told there's going to be constant patrol, and she tries to get that one cop's attention by waving at him. Because right before that, we see someone leaves the hospital, is in the backseat of a car, and it's Ralph. He's still alive. So I was thinking, okay, it's got to be Ralph. He faked his death somehow. It's got to have something to do with this cult. I was like, where's it going with this cult? So yeah, then someone in full Giallo trench coat, fedora, comes to the house, kind of chases her around by walking creepily. She ends up in the cemetery, in the mausoleum where the vagrant's lair was, where he was standing. Finds a gun. Martha gets there, finds a gun. The person comes out, reveals to be Marcus. I'm like, okay, so he was the killer the whole time. She empties a revolver on him, but they were full of blanks. And then that's when the doctor, the inspector, and Ralph come out behind him. So I was thinking a few different things at this point. I was thinking, okay, is it like a fake out twist, like Happy Birthday to Me? Is all of this fake? They were trying to like traumatize the trauma out of her, because when Marcus comes towards her, which is kind of a cool, like classic horror, he looks like Karloff, so like Frankenstein type scene, because he comes at her like this. and she lets out a scream, which I was wondering when her voice was gonna come back. I figured it was gonna be a point, like right before she was gonna die. It was gonna be a scream, and it was. So I was thinking, is it like Happy Birthday to Me, and all these murders were fake, trying to traumatize the trauma out of her to get her to speak again? Because the doctor was the first one to speak when they all come out. And that could have made sense because really I think the only dead body we actually saw was when they dug up that first girl to do I almost said post-mortem autopsy. All autopsies are. To sort of exonerate the hippie guy. And I was like, maybe seeing the bodies of Jenny and whatever was in her head. So that could have made sense. But no, then it came out that Martha's actually the killer. She killed Jenny out of jealousy because of not only could she speak, but she had a beautiful singing voice. And then she killed the housemaid to, I guess, make it look like a serial killer because they already suspected the random girl was a connected case already. But then she had to kill Christina because while they were playing that game, Christina told her that she found her Snoopy necklace out in the woods, which happened to be where the housemaid was killed. And then that was written in the journal entry that Ralph was reading in her notebook before he had his heart attack. And so I was thinking, like, is all the bullfighting flashbacks, like, right before she kills someone, is that supposed to symbolize her murderous feelings? And then we're not always, because it does pop up once when she's just looking through the contents of the briefcase. And then it just ends with her being walked away while reciting this poem about a mouse and a cur going to trial, which comes up a few times in the film because she has this reel-to-reel. Jenny gave her like this reel that I guess she wrote a poem that she recited. I don't know if it was for school or for her family, but she recites that poem as she's being walked away, and that's the end of the movie. So it had some good twists and turns. I mean, from the very beginning, I figured it was going to be the guy with the eyes and trying to figure out who that guy is. And then I thought, okay, they're really pushing this cult thing. So I thought it was going to be like an Eye in the Labyrinth type Giallo, but obviously more satanic. And really, the only ties is that he's a Satanist. Because also after she screams and they all come out behind Marcus, I thought, okay, are they all part of the cult? And they're doing these rituals for whatever reason. Now Martha's next. Could have also made sense, but I definitely did see Martha being the killer. And then when they told her that she was the killer, I was like, well, okay. There's the Edgar Allan Poe quote about how fear is a knife of ice that penetrates down to the conscience. I was like, does she realize she's the killer? Did she repress it? Does something else take over? But then we get flashbacks to all the victims of hers, and I guess she was with it and did know what she was doing. Killed her out of jealousy, and then the rest were all cover-ups. And then that first girl was completely unrelated. That was another twist. But it did a good job at making, really making us look at the doctor, the chauffeur, and then eventually even Ralph. I was convinced after we see him in the backseat of that car, and then when she's being chased through the house, or stalked rather, through the house at the very end, I thought that was Ralph. So definitely did see the twist coming. Really liked the score, especially that one piece where she's walking through the fog. It was this very Silent Hill type sound. Uh, but yeah, I like how it was more of this old dark house type story done in an Argento Giallo style. Again, not my favorite of this set. I would still put it at the bottom, but it's a thin margin between all these. I thought all four of these were pretty damn good. Orgasmo would still be my favorite of the four, but I still thought this was a solid film. So that is the Lindsay Baker Complete Giallo set by Severin. I've now reviewed all four. As of right now, I have no more Giallo to review, but I do have 11 coming in. I might order 2 more, and then I have 4 movies that are newer, that are Giallo throwbacks or homage films, similar to Abracadabra and Strange Coloring Bodies Tears. I have 4 or 5 of those coming in as well. So eventually I'll have a bunch more to do, but it might be more random movies from here on. There are a couple that I really do want to get to, so there might always be Giallo going on, at least for now. I finally broke 100, so that's good. But anyway, so I hope you enjoyed the Lindsay Baker reviews. I think, other than An Ideal Place to Kill, I have all of his Gialli, which that should be coming in at some point. So anyway, thank you for watching.